Hey everybody, welcome back to Excited About the Gospel podcast. I'm Jason Harwood, excited to be joined today on an interview podcast by Tom Telford. Tom has quite an extensive background, 25 years of business experience building companies, working in the financial services industry. In 2020, he founded Telford Holdings. And then in 2021, Tom, it seems like you sort of went a different direction, although there's some healthcare you mentioned in Telford Holdings, but now running Levo, a mind care company. You also host or co-host two of your own podcasts, Lift and Make Lighter and Brain Stoke. So Tom, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. This is awesome to be on this side of the mic. So I'm excited to just relax, answer the questions. So thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to spend time with people connecting. I hope you and I can visit a little bit about that and why I feel so strongly in this world of AI, why natural intelligence, the NI of the world, and connecting with another human is so critical in the world today. So yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Great. It's been fun because this has been a little bit nostalgic for me. If my memory is holding correctly after 25 plus years, I believe your dad was in the stake presidency in very formative years for me as I was going on my mission and all of those things, going through the temple for the first time. And so I have some memories of interacting with your dad in interviews and being set apart as a missionary and things like that. So it's been very fun for me to reflect back on those. But all right, let's start there. If that's, we'll go there. You work in the mental health space. And you just mentioned the importance of connection. I think we do okay with this in the church because we are sort of a connected group, maybe more so than other groups of people just because of our getting together for sacrament meeting every single week. But let's talk about the importance in today's society, particularly of, tell us what we need to know about making personal connections and actually talking to people face to face.
Yeah, wow. There's so much there, in the mental health world, we say, okay, let's unpack this, And so, yeah, I mean, there's so much to discuss about connection and the challenges of our world today. Let's just start societally, if you don't mind. So in the mental health world, the gold standard of care is based around a model that's called the biopsychosocial model. And so when you think about that term, there's a lot there, but bio is the body, what's going on with the body or your physical person, the psycho, the mind, what's going on mentally, and then the social, which is your family, your friends, your community, your church, your religion, your civic, interactions. It is what's going on in the system. And so the biopsychosocial model is this idea of you may be able to address what's going on with your body, but if something is going on in your mind, or if something's going on in your family relationships or at school, which we'll talk about, you need to be able to address the broader whole, the whole human. And today, oftentimes in the mental health space, there's a focus on symptoms, right? That's kind of the healthcare world of, well, I've got a sniffle and so I've got a cold and I'm going to take a pill that is going to address my runny nose or my cough. When in reality, to get better from a common cold, right, that pill that you take to address symptoms is not going to address really the root cause of what's going on. And so, to go back to your question, when you think about connection has this incredible power in our mind and in our body. And what I mean by that is when you connect with another human in a genuine way, right? Jason, when you hug your spouse, when you spend time eyeball to eyeball connecting with a child, there literally is what I call, God meds or God medication, right? And that God medication is what we call the 4 happy chemicals. In my podcast, the Brain Stoke podcast, or one of them, we often talk about getting your daily dose. DOSE. Dopamine,
Mm.
oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Get a daily dose means get a dose of connection, get a dose of these happy chemicals that tell your mind, tell your brain, and tell your body that you matter, that life matters, that you're capable, that you have the capacity, as a son or daughter of God to do and accomplish things in this life. And so those feelings that we get, by connecting with other humans, that dopamine, oxytocin especially, is so critical to how we feel. And so today, because of phones, because of working remotely, because of all of these things that are such cool technology, right? And that is so amazing in our world today. But on one hand, it's a blessing. On the other, it's a curse. And the curse side is that there's generations now, younger generations who are growing up and they're isolated and isolated in a significant way for
Mm-hmm.
hours and hours interacting with technology.
Mm.
And again, I don't want to throw technology under the bus, but when you take that, right, technology smoothie and you then blend in COVID, now we've got this recipe that's a disaster, frankly, for people becoming isolated, told to be isolated, almost government mandated to be isolated. And that's been a challenge. And so when we think about the broader mental health implications of connection, it's real.
Mm.
There's not one family today who, if you really sit with the parents and talk about their relationship in their marriage, or you talk about their connection with their children and just say, what keeps you up at night? What's concerning to you? No doubt there's going to be some discussion of isolation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Lack of connection, lack of genuineness. Unfortunately, for a lot of families, the mobile phone has become the BFF, right? It literally is like they have a better relationship with this little device than the literal people who brought them to the earth, right? Who they're in love with and married to. It's just real. So
Mm.
connection, in the broader kind of mental health world, there's categories of, different mental health challenges and mental illnesses. One of those is addiction. And there's lots of different kinds of addictions, whether drugs, alcohol, pornography, gambling, there's a lot. When you study addiction, the opposite of addiction, or the medicine for addiction, is connection. And it's really interesting to kind of think that through. Well, why? What causes addiction? What is at the root of that, disease? And when you think about, the right fix for it, you go to an AA meeting, you go to therapy, you go to drug and alcohol treatment. They're going to talk about the 12-step program. The whole program and curriculum for getting better or treating addiction is genuine connection with humans, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I won't dive into that, but we could for an hour just talking about why is it that addiction becomes so prominent in someone's life when connection is not in existence, or genuine
Mm.
connections with other people. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Jason, there's a lot there, but
And
connection is so key to
if this is
what
something,
people need.
yeah, if this is something that really interests people, your two podcasts are great places to go. Again, Lift and Make Lighter and Brain Stoke, both
Yeah,
very good
thank
on
you.
this.
Yeah.
So my mind goes sort of two things. So I'll go down route number one. I currently have my second and third children who are out on missions, a boy and a girl. So they're overlapping. And my older son, who has returned from a mission, and I vividly remember him asking me, Dad, when you served your mission, how many elders or sisters went home for mental health concerns? And I said, man, I served in a fairly tough mission, Philippines, third world country, not an easy transition, language and culture. I said, I didn't know of a single missionary who went home. And he said he served in Hawaii, which is like maybe the easiest mission you can serve. And just from, it's a very nice place. He said, they had people going home all the time. And so in this 20-year span, all of a sudden, and we hear about this, missionaries and young people in the church. When I ask people about it, most often the response is social media. Is social media the easy answer around why are we seeing such an increase in mental health challenges and difficulties that, as you mentioned, affect pretty much every family?
Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, that's low-hanging fruit to say social media is the cause. So if you kind of back up and you kind of think through, behavior, people, why do people end up on social media? What is it about social media that is so attractive? And I just alluded to it a minute ago. There's a movement in the world today talking about dopamine. And dopamine is really interesting because, again, it's one of these feel-good chemicals that God gave us to feel good, to feel motivation, to feel a desire to go do and become, right? And so, think of Adam and Eve, right? I'm thinking like in my head, maybe this caveman era, right? Of you got to go, do the work by the sweat of your brow, right?
Mm.
And so you go out and you scaffold a fire, you chase animals, you have to survive. And so you have to go be productive. Well, the productive chemical that tells your brain, this is good and I'm doing something and I'm going to take care of myself, that's dopamine,
Mm-hmm.
right? So go back to social media. What are people doing on social media that reinforces them staying on social media? And there's some really brilliant authors and researchers out there right now that call scrolling is cheap dopamine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if I'm looking at my phone, like just think of how silly it is, but Google like the grandfather of scrolling, just the guy who literally created this. Like think how silly that is. But the fact that you're moving and scrolling past content and people and ideas and information, right? You're getting stimulated, but how small is this movement? But it tells our brain, hey, I'm being productive. And so I'm scrolling and I'm learning something. Our brain doesn't know if that's a book on, black holes in the broader universe or something stupid from the Kardashians that like, really, who cares? But our brain doesn't know the difference. It's just feeling stimuli and it's getting cheap dopamine. Well, what does that tell our psyche or our brain or our habits? Hey, this is good for me. This feels really good.
Mm.
And in reality, you can spend time doing this. Your brain feels productive and you lose hours and hours of time. So those things are absolutely critical of just kind of understanding what is going on when we scroll social media. So when you say social media is to blame for all the problems, I mean, the Surgeon General last year said this is a problem. Like families, people, individuals, especially families with teen girls, you are at risk. Now, unpack it a little bit. Like, why are you at risk? Well, because your brain is reinforcing the behavior and it feels good. But what is the content that you're actually digesting?
Yeah.
Right? What is the act of what you're doing? And the majority of the time, even though people, I was joking the other day when I said to someone, you may have a PhD in Instagram University, but in the real world, right, you probably need to consider the implications of what is actually being done in that relationship with social media. And the answer is broad-based hours and hours and hours of comparing who you are to who is online, right? So if I spend my days scrolling, get rich quick, Lamborghinis and Gucci, my algorithm is literally going to learn from that and it's going to feed me Lamborghinis and Gucci and luxury, big lifestyles all day long. And if I'm sitting at home and I'm doing this for hours, there's no way in the world that my behavior can align with my appetite now to have Lamborghinis and Gucci, right? There is no behavior alignment in this versus what I'm seeing as success on my phone. And so when you think about what's going on and blaming social media, you really have to take a step back and say, why? Well, what is occurring really to blame social media? Well, there's a lot there. There's a lot of comparison, but it's time wasting. It's, it's putting yourself in a position where you literally lose track of time, which means you're not productive, which means you're not learning and growing and becoming, right? Time waste is a significant factor in how you feel mentally.
Mm.
So, when an individual sits with a mental health professional and they're unpacking their addiction or their habit of social media, the clinician is not going to spend a lot of time blaming the creators on social media for your problem. They're going to address the fact that your habit of scrolling has taken away and robbed you from your ability to get dopamine in a non-cheap way.
Mm.
You have to earn your dopamine, right? So the opposite of a scroller is someone who gets up, works out, studies the gospel, spends their days productively earning dopamine instead of just scrolling dopamine.
Mm.
And that's a very different outcome mentally for people in terms of how they feel about their life. Now, I have to just pause and say one thing, right? It's very low-hanging fruit to say social media, phones, again, like all of the blame. There actually is real mental illness that exists in the world that wasn't just caused by social media and time wasting and self-loathing behavior and habits. There are people who literally have, imbalances in their biology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hormones, most people don't know this, but hormones, literally the chemical that made you male and, your spouse female, your children male or female, those hormones that made us who we are genetically and as humans, they're absolutely critical to mental health. And so, at Levo, one of the companies that, I'm involved with, and, there's such a passion, project and organization for me, Levo is the bio and the biopsychosocial. We are assessing people's hormones to see what's really going on. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot there when you think through mental health. What is the root cause of it? What's going on? What are all of those factors and implications? But I would just encourage people to try to double click into why phones, why social media, what are those challenges? So one other thought to just leave you about that, in terms of what I see and what I feel that's going on in the world today, the world is fast, right? The speed at which the world is operating now is just fast. AI is incredible. What technology capabilities are today are just amazing for good and for bad. But because of the speed of what's going on, it's just natural to feel some anxiousness in terms of, am I keeping up? Do I know this thing? There's 800 new apps every day. I can't even operate my phone, and my children can, do it in their sleep by the time they're 5, right? The speed is just faster.
Mm-hmm.
So a thought for just listeners to think through is, you can't control the world, right? Why spend a lot of time, energy, and heartache on trying to slow the world down? What you can do is, one, how you operate in your own life and your family to get out of the speed, to take a step and pause and get out for some time. What is that? What is that called in the mental health world or my daily life? The answer is a coping strategy.
Mm.
Most people do not have a proactive coping strategy for how they're going to address the anxiousness in the world. And so for me, when I was growing up and, for the majority of my career, right, high stress startup companies, do an Ironman, right? Like I was all into like the hustle culture and accomplishment and all of those things. Well, what would I do with stress? Right? If you're LDS and you're trying to, quote, be on plan, what do you do with stress? You eat it, right? You internalize it. You do all you can, but in reality, there's a lot of LDS people who struggle with coping strategies.
Mm.
There's a reason why medications and addiction, and a lot of double life living. This is who I am outwardly, but inwardly, I'm broken. There's a lot of that goes on. And so proactive coping strategies is so critical in the world today. And what does that look like? Again, on Brainstoke, get your daily dose. Daily dose is just that. And that's trying to scaffold ways to have the happy chemicals more consistently in your life. And so if you follow any Brainstoke media, if you follow their social media, the whole brand is what's called the 5 S's, right? And the 5 S's in the brand and part of the logo and everything that we do there is that every day you are trying to get the majority of the 5 S's. So sleep, sun, sweat, serving other people creates more oxytocin than you can fathom. And the last one is stoke, meaning do something you're passionate about. If that's playing chess, play chess. If that's crocheting, man, make the quilt, do something to, to make the Afghan, whatever that is, spend a little bit of time doing what you're passionate about. But if you really sit with people and ask them, tell me about your positive coping strategies for all the stress in the world today, they would be like, well, I try to exercise like maybe a couple times a week. I try to sit and contemplate and just kind of breathe. That's, those are good. That's fantastic. But if you really ask about how often they're doing it or prioritizing it, it's pretty surprising, Sleep alone. If you just did this, if you just said to your spouse, hey, I know we can't be perfect, but this week, I wonder if we just traded off and made sure that the house gets run properly. But what if you took 3 days and I took the other 3 days and you went to bed at 9 p.m. on these nights and I went to 9 p.m. on those nights and we just covered for each other and we prioritized having 8+ hours of sleep a couple nights a week each. That sounds so silly, right? But if you really did that in your marriage, just got 2 to 3 nights of good sleep, it would shock you at how crisp you're going to be, how productive you're going to be, how capable of dealing with life stress you're going to be, and your relationships, you and your children, are going to be better. And I, that sounds again like I'm selling that, but sleep is literally, think about it. We were created as humans to rest a third of the day. The sun goes down. God tells us it's time. Like you need to stop the daily labor, no more sweat for a third of your time. And yet really in the world today, the sun goes down and we kind of amp up and we're like, cool, I don't have to work anymore, like Netflix and gaming. I'm going to scroll myself to sleep, right? Like all of those things. But that was never the intention, right? It was intended for us to take a third of the day every day to connect with people that we love, to reconnect with ourselves, and to do something productively to cope with the stress of the day and prepare ourselves and recover for the next day. And so that sounds oversimplified, but I can tell you for those people who prioritize their behavior to align with their intention, which is to live a more fulfilling and productive life, it works.
Yeah. So, because when you mentioned that popped into my head, the coping strategy, those are the 5 coping strategies: sleep, sweat, sun,
Serve.
How did I miss serve? Okay. Would that be a good place to start, to say, okay, every day I've got to get as many of those 5 things as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a journal sitting right next to me, this something that's been a habit for, 20 something years for my mission. It's a modern day, like Franklin day planner on, on steroids.
Yeah.
But, that planning is important for me. Every Sunday night, I do a pre-week plan. that sets the week. What am I going to do to prioritize those 5 S's? How am I connecting with the right people in my life? Right? It's just my way of managing time, which I'm a huge obsessive person over time. And yet if I do the plan and work the plan, the outcomes they work,
Mm.
So yeah, it's planning for it and prioritizing it.
I had jotted down a note here, and because I wanted to make sure that we come back to it. We've kind of gone a ways off of it, but I want to just maybe give us a couple of tips, because we do talk about the impact of social media, particularly on young girls, the impact of phones. So for those of us who have teen kids, is it best practice then to be a bit more regimented and limit screen time, cut off screen time at a certain point of the day? What are ways that we can maybe manage that as parents?
Yeah. So if it's okay, because this is excited about the gospel and, our frame of reference is
Yeah.
LDS.
Yeah.
I'm just going to mention a couple terms. So one, taking away someone's agency is not a long-term strategy, right? I mean, taking away that freedom is not a good long-term strategy. Having said that, right, what are we taught? Line upon line, right? You need to scaffold discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So if you give your kid a phone at 12 years old and you say to them, hey, screen time are these hours and this, it doesn't matter if you turn off social media. If that phone and device becomes their BFF, right? Even if they're staring at their notes, just typing on it for hours and hours in the day, that's still a problem, because it is their source for where they're going for meaning in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot. We could spend hours talking about this, but in my opinion, having been a parent who didn't get it right the first time, right? We did it wrong. We thought that a phone was kind of this rite of passage
Mm.
to be a teen, right? As
Yeah.
if it's
Yeah.
like some like merit badge that they've now earned, the ability to just blow up their habits and behavior. So, I mean, if you're a parent and your oldest child is getting close to where they need a phone, I would tell you, you need to do your homework. You truly need to understand the implications, not just social media, not just, the fact that they're going to be in a world that you can't even fathom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to put a plug in here. If you're that young family and you're getting to that point, if I were you, I would spend some time on Gab Wireless, their website,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
really understand the research and the technology behind safe tech for kids.
Mm.
And I think Gab Wireless is an awesome company who is doing what's right. Having said all of that, even Gab Wireless, which is a great tool, if you're punting and delegating critical conversations, and by the way, an opportunity to truly genuinely connect with your kids to a phone company or Apple or Samsung or anyone else for that matter, that's a problem,
Mm.
right? And so for a long time, it was like everybody wants to blame tech companies. But in reality, the blame sits squarely on the shoulders of the parent, right? You have to make a decision and be a consumer that's wise enough to know the implications of your buying decision and your gifting decision to your child.
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds like a fear tactic. I don't mean it to be, it's just real. Having said that, the phone that we messed up on, for our first child, what the repentance, the repair of that experience, is kind of like, how do we do this better? And the answer is to connect, to sit with your child
Mm.
and really understand and describe to them and teach them what a phone is, the dangers that are involved, the opportunities that are involved. I mean, how cool that you can go to a phone and access so much information that's positive and productive. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot,
Mm-hmm.
that is good there, but you need to be able to have the dialogue in a meaningful way with your child. And if all you do is spew fear at them about the phone, here's what's going to happen, right? They're gonna be scared for a while about it. They're gonna be nervous that they're not going to make you proud,
Mm.
but that doesn't mean they're not going to hide and access and do all they can to utilize their phone or a phone.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because when they go to school, right? Kids don't care about the Lamborghini in the parking lot of their buddy whose dad, is a billionaire. They care more about the phone than anything else. It is literally the most prized possession on the planet. I joke with my daughter all the time, who was a great soccer player. We joked at one point when she was in high school and we were talking, she's like, there's so many good girls my age. There's so many great soccer players, from around the country. Like, why does the international soccer scene, why are they so amazing? And why does the US struggle, at times in terms of that sport? And we had this, moment, and it was just told her in foreign countries, third world countries, those little kids, they can't wait to get their first soccer ball.
Mm.
And they will literally kill anybody who tries to take their soccer ball because it's their most prized possession. In the US, when kids are growing up, their most prized gift that they want is a phone.
Yeah.
They think that's the coolest thing on the planet,
Yeah.
right? And so parents need to recognize that they're this status symbol, right? It's a luxury item. It's connectedness to their peers. It's all of those things. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
right, knowing that it's going to be the most prized thing that they have and they're
Mm.
getting it at a young age, parents need to be able to sit in a very productive way with their children and have really meaningful dialogue about the risks, rewards, habits, behaviors, all of the things. And so that's a long answer to your question, but the
Yeah.
medicine that is needed in that situation is not to lock a phone away or take it away or, the thing is that kids are going to grow up and they're going to get one at some point,
Yeah.
right? Just like a kid is going to grow up and become a driver and drive a car, whose job is it to teach the child how to drive responsibly, how to drive safely? The phone is the same thing. It's a
Mm-hmm.
vehicle, and we as parents have to teach them how to drive and operate it, in a safe way.
Yeah. You mentioned Gab Wireless. Do you have any other resources that might be good? Because for many of us, I think we would sit down and think, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to say to my kids or have a credible thing other than your phone is destroying your brain.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. There are lots of them. One thing for parents, just to give a frame and a context of the risk and the danger of technology is to Google and research Surgeon General warning of social media 2024.
Okay.
Right? It was quite, the memo that went out and media picked it up in a broad way. Can I say that there was any sweeping outcomes or difference made because of it? Probably not. It's just the world that we're living in today that people want the technology and they're going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyway, I think that's a really good one, for parents to look at. But
Yeah. Okay.
but you should spend time and search, on your own, just ways to talk to kids about, phone use. And
Mm-hmm.
there's 100 different incredible authors, teachers, organizations who have really good ideas about speaking to your kids, about mental health.
Yeah.
One other thought, just in terms of
Yeah.
resources for parents, while we're on that topic in particular, there is a book that is out right now that I can't tell you how valuable it is for you to just, as a parent, read it, digest it, to really understand and frame the implications in the world today for mental health. And the name of the book is Anxious Generation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of it. Jason, have you heard of
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. I've read
Okay.
Jonathan Haidt, I think, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm staring at my phone as we speak, trying to pull it just to give, a resource. So I will focus, but that is so current and
Mm,
so timely and so accurate for what is going on and why in the world today in terms of phone
mm.
use that, yeah, it's a must read if you
Okay.
have parents and young adult or teens and young adults.
It's been sitting in my Audible like wish list for a while. I'll be honest, I've been a little hesitant to dive into it because I think like, gosh, maybe it will reveal how poor of a job I've done trying to
Oh,
raise children in a digital age. But yeah.
yeah. So there's a quote that I love, from my 40-year-old master's program. After years and years, I went back to school. And one of the things that I brought away from that was extraordinary things happen when knowledge, education, and learning are involved. And so
Hmm.
I would encourage, parents to, even though that may reveal something about your parenting grade, you can't afford not to. I'm telling you, you got to get
Yeah.
informed today. You know, if parents are not as diligent in learning, right, content that is going to help offset the content that their children are consuming, that's a problem, right?
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
don't mean match the anxiousness of your child. I mean, they're going to be anxious anyway. And so you have to have the skills, capabilities to be the mental health clinician in the home,
Mm.
right? The first mental health clinician in people's lives is, the parent coach in the home. So yeah, get informed.
Um, we haven't really even talked about like seven of the eight things that I was hoping to talk about with you. But on the other hand, let's sort of shift gears here. You talk about earning dopamine and the sort of that process of setting a goal, working towards a goal, achievement, accomplishment as one of the great principles not only of mental health, but I do think it's a gospel principle. You see it over and over again in the scriptures. So maybe talk to us about the impact of that and how we can use that as a mechanism and a tool in living a more successful, productive, healthy life.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a step back, I love the question. It's so good to just take a step back, 30,000 foot view, and really say, what was the original plan, right? Go back to like 101, seminary 101, like to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man, to bring to pass, right? It's a process, it's work, it's progression. It's line upon line upon line. How am I going to build my scaffolding to become, right, immortal and
Hmm.
have eternal life? And so I believe, right, in what I just described as dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. These are literally the happy chemicals that we were created, as humans to be able to feel, so that when we are doing and becoming and progressing, that God is saying to our brain, good job. Well done. Keep doing that. Do more of
Hmm.
that. Doesn't that
Hmm.
feel good? Man, I want to do more of that. Right? Those were feelings and emotions tied to chemicals that we were supposed to receive to reinforce positive progress. And the problem, right, that
Hmm.
we have is that there's other ways now that we are, right, stealing and buying cheap forms of that reinforcement. And in my opinion, it's just one more way that we have this um, challenge always of, am I going to, right, get those feelings and emotions in ways that we weren't intended to, but we can, right?
Hmm.
And there's all sorts of principles that we could go into there about um, things that we have capability to use that we probably shouldn't, for our betterment long term. So one of the questions you asked me was, if I were ever going to speak in general conference, what would the topic be?
Yeah.
Right? What would the title be? And so here's my answer, right? The answer is, don't make God small.
Mm.
God plays the long game. And if you really just kind of internalize that and think through that, I think oftentimes we kind of go about our lives and we just think, well, that wasn't really God's involvement. That's just me doing this or doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's just a workout, or, that's just, sleep, or no, like it was all part of the plan, you know?
Mm.
God was the author from the beginning. Literally, not just that we were created in the image, but we were created in the image with the capabilities to feel the things that are going to reinforce staying on plan and progress.
Mm-hmm.
And what a cool thing to think that our brain literally is receiving and feeling chemicals, right? That dose that is reinforcing, hey, good job. Stay on plan. Keep doing it. I'm here. I'm watching over. This was all part of it. And I think that oftentimes we as humans, we as, Christians, members of the LDS Church, we often tend to compartmentalize what part God is involved in and what God
Mm-hmm.
is not involved in. And I felt this way for years, or compartmentalized God is church. And what I've realized is that that is absolutely false. No, God is not church there. You don't stop like, well, church is over and now I'm, going home and taking a 4-hour nap and then I'll go to work tomorrow. No, God is in everything. My best business partner for the last 26 years is God. I have had the opportunity as an entrepreneur to literally to create business, to create opportunities for employment, to co-create with God the ability to provide, a living for my family and other people's families. That's been the coolest thing on the planet for me. What is my testimony rooted in? It's not rooted in, going to church on Sunday. It's not rooted in reading scriptures. It's rooted in my daily role as a husband, father, provider, and steward. And even though those other things amplify my testimony, my core, faith and testimony is rooted in my talents, abilities, interests that I use in my daily work. And so that's a long answer to your question, of going back to, what is there and what's going on, with dopamine. But that's it, is people make God small and think, my mental health cannot be supported with, with God has given me or blessed me with. That doesn't mean you can't and should reach out for resources and, get expertise, and help. You should. But I think it provides a lot of help to just know, oh yeah, like these chemicals that are the science behind wellness and health, they were from the beginning and they were intended to do what they're, supposed to do. The hard part, I think, for me that I see, in our business and in what we're doing to try to help people do, is that when people's mental health is struggling, it's very common when your health is not great for you to kind of lose hope, right? That someday you could feel better, or that you're going to get better, or, I was sick with pneumonia for the last 2 weeks. I'm just now getting better, and I'm the worst sick person on the planet, right? I can't stand to not have a workout. If I miss 2 days in a row without a workout or sweating, my mental health goes down quickly.
Huh.
So I was sick for 2 weeks. I lost hope really quickly, and that's hard, because when you are sick physically, mentally, emotionally for a long period of time, it's really easy to lose hope. And yet, if you're just willing to go out and sit in the sun for a short amount of time, don't get burned, be smart. But if you're willing to take a walk, right? If you're willing to do some small things to fill the feel-good chemicals, really quickly, your brain says, I'm going to be okay.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel okay. I have the ability to cope with that.
Mm.
I'm not well now, but I'm going to be. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
come. So, Jason, I could preach
Yeah.
about that. So I'll pump the brakes, but yeah,
This is great.
don't make God small, and just know that God plays the long game.
Mm. Yeah. Talking with Tom Telford. Again, you can check out more. You can go to levomind.com. I'll put a link for that in the podcast description. Check out the Lift and Make Lighter podcast and the Brain Stoke podcast. This one is excited about the gospel. So I love to ask, what's an element or an aspect or a principle of the gospel that you get very excited about?
Oof. Jason, someday someone is going to get into my phone. Speaking of spending time on phone, um, I don't know why, but from the time I came home from a mission until now, I love writing. It's my preferred form
Hmm.
of expression. I write a ton, literally daily. I'll write while I'm on my bike, in my, phone app. I just spend a lot of time writing an expression, and I log it into my phone.
Huh.
There's probably 300 talks, that are in my phone that I've written that exist there. So, I oftentimes, when I refer back to this idea of the principle, that I hang my hat on most, what I believe most that I think is important. And that is um, that we have heavenly parents. And I say
Hmm.
parents because, a quick story, maybe for you, just to kind of, and I know we're winding down a little bit, but years ago, I had this moment in time where I was sitting in a home office like I am now, not this one, but a different one. And it was the day. It was the day that every entrepreneur, every startup founder wants to get to. And it's the day of liquidity event, right? It's the day that you recognize selling a company. And I had dreamt about that day for years and years and years. At 21 years old, I wrote a life plan that in double my age at 42, I was going to be done working. I just set this intention. I dreamed about it. I planned for it. And I literally backed into this is what I want to achieve. And that day really came at 37, not 21.
Hmm.
And even though it's changed since then financially and what I'm involved in now, that was a very important day in my progress. And that day, and sitting in my home office and logging into my brokerage account, username and password to log in and recognize, wow, I just sold a company and it's real. And the balance was there. And it was this moment in
Hmm.
time of, to be frank, because I was the slow kid growing up, ADHD, dyslexia, I struggled to learn and read. I was the slow kid pulled out of class, almost 3 to 4 times a week because I struggled all growing up and into high school. And that day in my office, there was just this moment in time of, I did it.
Hmm.
I actually amounted to something, which is so silly that we as men, me as a provider, right? We hang our hat on, my worth is tied to money. It's
Mm-hmm.
tied to how good I am at providing. Well, that day, for what it's worth, it was just a trophy, right? It was just a moment of like, I became something, right? I did something that everybody said I probably wasn't capable of doing. And to be frank, it was a little arrogant. It was kind of like double fisting the air, like I told you I could do it. And right, there was a little bit of arrogance to it. And then something smacked me across the back of the head, this really strong impression. And the impression was, Tom, you did not get here by yourself. Self-made is a lie. And in that moment, I recognized a question just occurred to me. How did I get here? And then it changed to the impression changed from how to who got me here. And there was just this powerful moment of recognizing, even though I had lots of people that I was mad at who told me that I was slow and coaches who treated me like crap, I had a list of people that I was angry with, but I also had a list of people who blessed my life. They loved and lifted me. And
Mm-hmm.
as I really looked closely at that, I started to make a list. I listed all of the men and women over the years who had a significant impact on my life. Then I went back to the list again and looked closely at the key moments. What were the key moments that actually built me, made me confident, made me think that I was capable, made me think that I am a child of God? And those people on that list who were in those key moments, they were predominantly women.
Hmm.
Excuse me. It was this moment in time of recognizing who built me, really. And I know that there's some amazing men in my life. My dad is an incredible person. But if I'm really honest about what is and who is in my progress, it's been women. My mom, my mission mom, my mother-in-law, especially my wife, my sisters. I had a school teacher that changed my stars in fourth grade. I had a teacher who changed my stars as a sophomore in English, another one who changed my stars in creative writing, a business partner who was a woman who was the most successful woman I've ever met on the planet in my life. And she happened to be my business partner. Right? These were incredible women who built me. Well, that day in that office of recognizing who built me, there was this moment in time of, does my behavior reflect and appreciate and show who actually built me as a man?
Hmm.
And I just knew that day that I needed to have and appreciate a divine relationship with the female divine. And I know that in the church, we don't talk a lot about a mother in heaven, but I 100% believe that that is true. I know who built me here. There's no way there's not a woman who built all of us here. And I just feel that in my bones.
Hmm.
So when you talk about, what is the principle of the gospel that has been the most meaningful to me, it's heavenly parents. Parents, plural. If you study the term God, God doesn't mean Heavenly Father solely. God means, right, divine plural. And so, yeah, that's so meaningful to me. It's changed my paradigm, how I live as a man, as an adult, how I treat women, how I think about my daughter, how I think about my nieces,
Hmm.
how I think about women in my life is just very different. Well, fast forward to that just meaningful principle of heavenly parents, right? Levo, the company I now started and own, when I did it, it was very important for me that Levo do two things. One, that it's predominantly owned and operated by women.
Hmm.
There are no better humans on the planet to address the mental health need in society today than women. And the three business partners that I have at Levo, they're unreal. These women are not only talented and smart, they have the biggest hearts and compassion on the planet. If you go to levomind.com, levomind.com, and you look at our website, you tell me, what was our intention as a company when we started? And the answer is capture the feminine feel and compassion in a brand and a look and feel, right? Kevin Day, who's our director of brand management, and another really smart guy, Matt Garner, who runs his own firm,
Mm-hmm.
design firm. Those two gentlemen created and captured, right, the feminine in a business that is driving the mental health of people. And so, yeah, Jason, when you talk about what's the principle, it is making sure that feminine divine is part of the world I live in today, what my focus is,
Hmm.
the meaning behind a lot of it, the companies that I'm building, who I want to build with, all of those things, kind of stemmed from this idea of what do I believe is the most valuable principle to me? That's it.
That's powerful. Tom, thank you so much for sharing that and bringing that to light of the impact of women, obviously, and the godliness for sure. Talking with Tom Telford. Check out a couple of his podcasts, website, all links in the podcast description. Man, this has given me a lot to focus on. I guess I will go now download and actually listen to The Anxious Generation. But so many powerful insights, and I appreciate the connection there with some of the real challenges that we're facing today, and God and faith, and that this is all part of his plan. Tom, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.